Hey Tony, how you doing? Thanks for coming. After dark with Tony, late night.
Yeah,
Other
late
side of
night
the
for me,
world.
just
Oh
regular
man,
for
it's
you.
good to see you.
Appreciate it. It's great seeing you guys. I love always to talk all things British basketball, and we've known each other for a lot of years. Like you said, when you came in, I had just started at Everton, so that's a lot of history, a lot of games,
But
and
I remember first was the Capitals, not the Capitals, sorry, in London. Well, first year
yeah,
playing. Was
right. That do you know? Listen, those guys, the guys that played on that team, great. But I eradicate that season from my resume, and also from my. It was kind of like it just happened to be there, and but yeah, it's one of those kind of little projects. I think that also what upsets me about those type of things that puts my winning lifetime percentage down when I really don't need that. But anyway.
that was a testament to you though, because that was a difficult situation. But you're always really competitive. It was always every team was always like, oh god, this is like a tricky game, and because you never knew, like, you know what I mean. Everybody was still well coached and well drilled, and it just didn't have the right for whatever reason. But anyways, we're not going to talk about that too much. We're not here to talk about that. We've been doing this now for a few weeks, and it's been a lot of fun for me because I'm fresh on the block, really, to all the British basketball scene in real extent. And I know I speak to people and I speak to you over the time, but I don't really get as much private conversation as I'd like with a lot of different people. But it's exciting to have you on. It's going to be, hopefully, what I hope also from these talks is just that people get to hear about different things you go through as coaches, different parts of the world. You've got a whole new experience that we haven't had on this show yet, where you've coached in your journey. And I think the people that do tune in and watch, and which is amazing, they'll get a lot from it. So we were happy.
Yeah, but you spent more years in the league than me now. I think it's the time I've been out. So no, that's awesome. I mean, listen, I have nothing but respect for the Sharks franchise. Ever since the first days that I was involved at London Towers and going against those guys, so Yuri and Sarah, all of the whole backroom staff, love being involved with those people sitting there talking basketball. And then obviously Chris was such a big influence in my coaching career, and then to like start battling with you and all of the teams you've had, and some of the great players you've had. So it's I've always enjoyed my times going there. So yeah.
So give me a little bit of backstory about kind of how you got into the game of basketball, really, and then we'll talk more about how you got into coaching. But let's just get a little story of how you got into the game of basketball, because obviously,
it's a real. I have I got a bunch of stories. People that know me that I could talk forever, and I can throw a lot of different stories at people. But I'm going to tell this story because I don't think I've said it publicly. Sometimes in the UK, unlike in America or Europe, you got to be pretty lucky to be involved in the game, especially back then. When I was 11 years old. But my story was was really lucky. I used to live one road down from a guy that we went to primary school with, called Barry Wright, and actually it was two or three of us, and we went to our secondary school, and we met a teacher called Colin Brigden, and he straight away introduced us to the game at 11. And when I say introduced us, started coaching us at like really a high level. And before I knew it, that was those first sessions, because basketball was alien to us. We find out that Barry's brother is Steve Wright, who was the ex-England captain and had won a bunch of trophies at a team called Avenue, which was a big team back in the 70s. So, here he is, he's 6'3", like at 11, 12. So, and then we suddenly, we're winning all the national championships. And I was just blessed to be involved with a lot of good players at that time. And like Roger Huggins, Andy Gardner, Roger was part of Sheffield Sharks. But my contemporaries were Andrew Bailey, Ronnie and Steady. they were the guys I was going up against. So I progressed and played at a pretty decent level, National Junior League level. But you know, it was tough to keep going against Ronnie and Steady and Andrew, and there were a bunch of other really, really high level guards at that time in London. So, you know, I got to my late teens and early 20s, and I was still playing, you know, pretty good level, and I just tore both my ACLs within like 10 months. I tore one, and then I tore the other. So I didn't know if that was kind of like kind of something that told me, you know, was playing the right route for me or not. And at the same time, I started working for a local authority, and they needed someone to coach a basketball team in the London Youth Games. That was the London Borough of Newham. So I was very lucky there to go straight from, like, as a young player. I was still playing like in kind of the regional leagues and stuff. But yeah, so that was my introduction to the game, and really, like, as much luck as you could have. We had two great teachers at that first school that were committed. One was involved with the Hemel Hempstead team, which eventually became Vince's team, and one was involved with East London Royals. So we had such incredible pathways, and I never forget those people, because, you know, they've allowed me to become the person I am.
Going back to that kind of time period, who was the kind of idol for you that you kind of thought, let's say in the UK? It's
not even questionable. Like, we were taken pretty much once a week by our teachers to Crystal Palace, and you know, I idolized Alton Bird. Like, you know, he was everything. I'd go back the next morning, you know, practicing everything I saw him do. He was just a magician, and I was always pass first, just simply because of watching him. But I love watching all of those players at Crystal Palace. So they were my inspiration, which is quite funny, because I ended up, you know, knowing Alton, you know, knowing Paul Stimpson, working with Dan Lloyd, you know, all of these type of players that were on that team. And, you know, they don't really know that now, but, you know, even people like Steve Bucknell and stuff, you know, where, like, I look up to those guys and always have done. And, you know, they're talking to me like on the same level now, but it's not like, so you probably experienced that before as well.
So you developed that passion and love, and then how was your transition to coaching? I know you started out coaching with the council and doing that. So how did that progress to you getting into the BBL and that level of basketball?
Again, you know, all luck. So started getting some real influences in my life. I was lucky with the local authority. They let me set up a National Junior League team. So we ran that for 1 year, and then I met. So I have 5 real influences in my coaching career. I met, the first one was, well, the first 2 at that time was Mark Dunning. He was the person I built most of my philosophy around, but and he's been probably the biggest mentor to me. And then I met Joe White, the late great Joe White, who, you know, I consider the best junior coach to have coached. And he was coaching in Hackney, I was coaching in Newham. That's basically the 2 neighboring boroughs. And at that time, there was a very young London Towers team, which wasn't the real London Towers. It was just before that. Vince can explain the whole history to that. That's because he was part owner of that team at that time as well. And so we, to cut a long story short, myself and Joe saw that we could really run a great junior program. And at that time, there were National Junior League was not like it is now, where there are 40, 50, 60 clubs. There were some real powerhouse clubs. So you had East London Royals in East London, you had Brixton in South London, you had Birmingham, you had Manchester, you had Cheshire. There were some really, really high level clubs. And so we knew that we just couldn't beat East London Royals. They were run by Humph Long. They had a great junior program. They were linked into the national junior teams. So we realized that, you know, we started talking, said, look, we got to join these two teams together. And like I said, the young London Towers kind of team at that time was starting to develop. So like Roy and Vince and those people, they said, look, you can use our name and run the program underneath there. So we joined our two local teams together, and that was the kind of start of London Towers junior program. And that's how I got involved in firstly, you know, I never perceived myself as a professional coach. You know, I was always about coaching young players and developing young players. I never had any interest in coaching professional players. And at the same time, when London Towers was bought by Martial Arts and moved over to Wembley, they played at Sobel that one season, a couple of seasons, and I was very lucky to get to meet the owners. They needed someone that was going to become a development officer for that team full time, and so I got myself. That was my first ever job in full time basketball, being the development officer. So that's where I met, you know, more influences, people like Kevin Cadle, and I was lucky to be. Kevin was allowed me to be around the professional team and. You know, to be kind of like as a pseudo almost assistant coach and stuff. So I was lapping up that, but at the same time, I wasn't like focused in that. Wasn't my focus. I love being around them. I love talking to him. He gave me advice every single day, but because we shared an office. But at the same time, my focus and Joe's focus was to produce the best young players that we could produce. And there were two aspects. People ask this question a little bit. People know me, understand what I say. We never, winning was a byproduct for what we did. We knew that we could find the best talent in London. We knew we could find like incredible talent. So what we did is our job was to teach as well as we could the fundamentals of the game and then a structure. And then secondly, we needed to make these young people better people, you know, so we needed to really guide them, because there were, you know, like in any inner city situation, there's a lot of issues around that. And so that was our main purpose. And there's never been a better person than Joe, you know, who was, you know.
I obviously I never met Joe, but I've heard a lot from Olu, who was playing for me for a long time, and you know, very, very big advocate and gives all the success to and mentoring to Joe, really. Tell me about some of the kind of guys you produce. So give me some of the guys you thought, you know, let's talk about some of the talented guys, some of the guys that caught you by surprise in the development. Because, you know, we have talked about that here, development for younger players as advice. So let's look back a little bit about who are some of the guys that, you know, you turned out of that setup that really did you guys proud.
The original players. So we had a kind of tiered kind of in respect of their age. So the first two players that come to mind are players that came right from the start from me, which is Steve Ogunjimi, who had a long career, you know, won some trophies at Newcastle and did a few other bits and pieces. And Errol Seaman, who also won some trophies at Manchester and at Brighton. They were kind of in our first phase. And let me tell you, there were some really good players that played with them. I don't want to just keep naming names because, you know, there were guys that played professionally, but maybe weren't the real big names that people would have thought. And then we have the next kind of tier, like next group, which was basically the Andrew Sullivan, Jonathan Lavinia, Robert Tuitt, like that kind of age group. And, you know, there were like super talents in that age group that Richard Midgley actually is in that age group as well, which we found and we developed. So there were a lot of good players, and Olu actually comes just after that. So Olu's kind of still in that group, because then we have this kind of next phase down, which includes people like Perry Lawson, Darius Defoe, trying to think who I'm missing, and then obviously Pops Mensah-Bonsu, you know, those guys. Pops never played more National Junior League when he was really young, and then obviously went to to high school and then college, and then obviously on to the NBA. So, I mean, there are so many young players that came out of that program. And it's interesting that a lot of them are actually now giving back to the game and coaching and stuff. But I really, like every time they, some of these young guys, like just 2 or 3 days ago, one of them wrote on Facebook, "Hey, it's down to Tony and Joe," but it's not. It's, we gave you an opportunity, you took it, you worked as hard as you could. And then you became a really good person, and now you're giving back and doing whatever you're doing. And I always say this, Atiba, that I know this is going to sound, really like, it's going to sound a bit obnoxious, but I personally am as proud of the people, of those younger players that became really good people and did other jobs like teachers or firemen, or we have like an investment banker, that came out of the program, and these people, running their own junior teams. That gives me more pleasure than just saying, "Hey, Andrew Sullivan and Pop Spencer Bonsu," who obviously, like, you would have to be blind not to know that Andrew Sullivan was the best 16-year-old that probably ever played. I mean, there's a lot of debate between him, Steve Bucknell, Joe Moore, but I never saw a 16-year-old play at that level ever, and nor did a lot of people. So, yeah.
Well, I think the testament is you go into it just trying to, give kids a different outlet, put them in a positive environment, teach discipline, focus. And so success takes many different forms and shapes. Not every player's the success is, like you said, the Sullivan. It's just about getting them to university or getting them to be a plumber or whatever it is, and they end up having a productive life, where they're making it better for their family and their kids, and it goes on.
And
that's the main thing.
You've had those type of players go through your program right from the start, and that's actually what being Sheffield was. It's been, there've been always good local players that have gone through there, and also imports as well. I mean, you've had some of the best imports, and those people have always wanted to be associated to your organization, which is like a credit in that respect, because of the way you treat people and stuff. And I think that's really important. I mean,
it is.
The way you treat people, I think, is so important.
I think that focus breeds more success than just focusing on outcomes and results and on the basketball court. If you have that, just treat someone good and hope for the best, and you gotta treat people right to get good results. And I think that's the ultimate test, really. You did mention Kevin Cadle a bit, and one thing I'll notice when I do talk to Vince, especially when I go down there and we're playing, whatever the case may be, he'll still say things, that advice he took from Kevin. Rest in peace. I didn't get a chance to really meet him. I talked to him a few times on the phone and stuff like that. But what was it like being his assistant coach at the time, at the height of the Towers and all that going on there?
Well, he was a unique character, larger than life, super positive, and like from the outside and from a pure basketball perspective, he was hard nosed, and he was only about winning. So everything was about winning. Got on really hard, got into players hard. But at the same time, he had that kind of ability to, he gave out the books on the bus for players to read, and he was really really fought the game through. But a lot of people misunderstood Kevin in some ways. I found that there was because it's a little bit like watching the Jordan documentary in the last 4 or 5 weeks. People are like, when they see it like an obsessed winner, and that's what Kevin was. Was the greatest winner until Fab broke all those records. But he was so focused on winning that sometimes that rubbed up the other coaches the wrong way. And so I've heard some old timers say, "Oh, he was arrogant, he was this and that." But one thing I found from him was he would always be ready to impart knowledge and say stuff to you. And what's the amazing thing? Two things come to mind. First, another influence of mine was coaching influence of mine was Laszlo Nemeth, who was the ex-England coach. And Laszlo picked me from nowhere. I was only coaching National Junior League and Division 2. That was our second London Towers team. Basically, our under 23 team was playing. We'd almost made it to Division 1. We were so strong. And he picked me as an assistant coach on the England team. And so anyway, this is digressing a little bit. But Laszlo's connection got me involved in professional basketball. He had coached in Iceland, and he said to me, look, my ex-player is a general manager of a team in Iceland. They're looking for a young head coach. Would you be interested? And to be honest with you, at that time, I had no desire to coach professionally. But the opportunity kind of like sounded great, because at that time, there was so many great coaches in the BBL, and the BBL was just young. It was, the massive sport. And so, to cut a long story short, I took that job. And I remember being in the office before I left London Towers, and Kevin just, he said to me, listen, young guy, I know you're going to do a good job. He said, but I'm going to give you the most important piece of advice for pro coaching. And so I'm listening. I'm like, what is it? What's he going to say? And he just said, recruit, recruit, recruit. I was like, he said, I don't care if you're fucking Bobby Knight, Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich. He said, unless you get the players, like high level talent, you will never win in this game. So I said, I've always tried to take that, some years, I think both of us have had really good years, and some years have been like some busts, but,
simplest advice is always the best, it seems like, right?
Yeah, the simplest. So that's my Kevin story from there. So, and just to say it, I mean, Kevin would call me like, maybe once a month throughout the seasons, just even when he was either not involved with Sky, when he was just doing NFL, he would always take time to reach out and just ask the question, how you doing? What's the situation? And, I'll never forget that. And
that's
great,
beautiful.
Great guy.
I've always heard that. And it's special when you have something like that in your life, especially professional life. It's big.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's look a little bit around. You definitely have won multiple things in the BBL, and we'll get back to that. But let's just look little bit what we've talked about. You've seen. I'm sure you've seen a couple of these or has heard them, whatever. But we've had Chris Finch on, and we've had Fab now. A little bit talking about the American game and what that's like. Take us a little bit about some of the other countries you've been to outside of the UK, because you probably got one of the most varied and dotted resumes as far as coaching in some really, really tough leagues in Europe that people may understand, and probably shed light a little bit on the style of play, what's different, and what you had to adjust with.
Well, it's nice that you choose two NBA coaches to talk about. The only good news is that I coached one of them, and obviously worked for the other. So that's my only claim there. But no,
everybody got their own journey. If you want it, you'll get it soon enough. I'm sure. I wouldn't count you out by no means.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I never really pushed to be involved internationally. Like I said, I went to Iceland, came back. And then obviously got the job with Newcastle Eagles, Paul, and this is, we're all involved, like you've been, we're fortunate if we get involved with great organizations. And, I count Paul along, like with the Sheffield people, as one of the best. So I was very lucky there. And then, after going to Birmingham and coaching in Europe and stuff, I took the years off and started coaching at the Hackney Academy. So when I finished the Everton project, Everton Mersey project, kind of like I really at that stage I mean, we can talk about that very quickly, but, you know, I was pretty upset about after we finished, you know, we had the great season and not being able to take that team back and run it back, you know. So again, making the reference to the Jordan documentary, I know exactly what you're saying. And every moment I see those guys, I talk about it. So when at that stage, I felt really kind of betrayed by the whole BBL process. So I said to myself, look, I got to get out and try to coach at the highest level possible. So I went to Germany, and it was brutal. You know, when you go now into like these type of countries, every game matters. Like the coaching is much, you know, is stronger across the board. So like, you know, I'm facing like you and Rob every day, you know, every single game. There's no games off. Super hard to win on the road. It's one of the funny stories I tell you. You'll laugh at this because actually you've heard me say this a few times on the court in the BBL games. But when I went to Germany, I had still had kept my numbering system for my offenses, like 23, 34, 45. And so, you know, I'm in Germany, and after the first like couple of games, my players are coming down like 23, and the drumming and the crowd is so loud, they can't hear the numbers. So they're like, they're just questioning what the hell. So I ended up changing my whole way of play calling. So now it's, you know, 2 up, you know, 2 side, you know, fist up, fist down, you know, because you can't hear, the noise. And the noise. So, you know, when I came back to the BBL for the Glasgow season, and I'm shouting across the court, either at my player or at the referee, and everyone in the arena hears it because there's no noise or no consistent noise. So I've always like, you know, it's always driven me mad about the amount of technicals that I got for shouting, you know, when the crowd should be drowning that out. So yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, Germany was
how did you find the so, you know, you had probably a lot of carte blanche in the BBL as far as putting your team together and some of the decision making kind of, I would assume, maybe not, but in Germany, what was that process like when you went to a new team? And
pretty much when you go anywhere internationally, you're going to be in the lap of like good GM, especially in your first season, because you don't know the local players. And so they probably put the local players together. And they certainly did in Germany. I mean, everyone has a role, and the GM's role is different to what it is in the UK. In the UK, most of the time, we're putting the teams together with our own basketball knowledge. We might not be doing contracts, but we're definitely putting the team, hey, I want this player, I want this player. But in Germany, the GM's doing only personnel decisions and basketball decisions. And that's the same for most of mainland Europe. And the biggest difference is, you know, size and physicality, you know, especially in those mainland Europe leagues. And that's why our British teams struggle when they go into Europe, you know, when you hear what Rob says and stuff, because we're just not used to the physicality. We've got the athletic ability, we got the speed, we got quickness. You play preseason games and stuff, but those guys are coming off the bench and just wearing on you, and they're really physical, and they can do it consistently at a high level for, you know, like most of the game, and then every game. So it took me a while to really learn the rhythm of those games, and exactly understanding that every single game count, you know, it really counted. And
how much did you change your system from the UK to Germany?
UK, I didn't change much. I didn't change much at all. I made tweaks. You know, players were higher. Some of them were higher level. Some of them weren't. I mean, there was slightly less athletic players in Germany. You know, we were just slightly less athletic. So we needed more passing, more ball movement. But yeah, it was a real interesting one there. And then from there, I went to the exact opposite. You know, I went to Southeast Asia, to Vietnam, and that was just like an eye-opener, because basically we were paying crazy money to imports, but at the same time, the locals couldn't play. I mean, when I say they couldn't play, I mean, we got to the playoffs in my first season there, and that was the first time they'd ever got to the playoffs. And I remember we took an injury to one of our kind of half American Vietnamese players, and we only had 5 players. We only had 5 guys that could actually play. And so when one player came in, like, you know, we moved the ball around the you know, like on an offensive set, we really moved it well. We hit him in the corner, like he's wide open, and he just airballs, like he didn't know what to do. So when I got there, that was the level of the play. I mean, they could barely make, you know, competitive layups and stuff. But we really, really worked with them hard. But it didn't, I got to admit, that really kind of hurt my coaching, because I had to dumb down a lot of stuff. And it was an interesting one. That was a completely different project. Same for, you know, trying to get their national team program up and running again. But I'm very proud of what I did in Vietnam, because, you know, that team now is flourishing. They had a real big, real base. I got a facility built. They have a domestic professional league that I set up with now, I think they just added their 16th and they're doing a great job. So I'm really.
How long were you there?
Was there 3.5 years. Yeah, 3.5 years. So it was a good period of time.
I mean, that's still a bit like perceptually, because it's no one really knows unless you go there probably what it's like. So you're trying to. There's a few leagues where you some of the players come out, you're like, hold on, is that league really good? And then sometimes you're like, you don't know where to judge it at. Sometimes I feel like that's one of those leagues. So it's interesting.
For sure.
And it's good that, you know, tell your experiences, because it's probably helps a lot of people just understand the layout of the world. It's a world game, and it's different everywhere.
Yeah. And then obviously the last place now is Japan. And, you know, that's another culture shock in that almost all the local players don't speak English. I mean, they understand basketball like I've never seen before. Like conceptually, these guys, like, you know, you can throw all kinds of complex systems, you know, offenses. You can throw in, like, you know, I had 2 kind of end of game type sideline out of bound plays that I've always used, and, you know, can get good looks out of them. You know, I end up like with 6, 8 here at this moment, you know, like these guys just, you know, so high level conceptually, technically super proficient. Their biggest problem is that they don't have the size, they don't have the physicality, and they, you know, so was trying to teach competitiveness, and, you know, like, hey, you know, when you drive it, you got to drive to the body, and you got to finish under contact, you know, versus a lot of the time they would drive in and trying to dish at the same time. But they're really, you know, I tell you, like, some of the stuff that I ended up changing, I changed more in Japan than I've ever done before. And that included even drills. Like, one of my most favorite drills, like 3-point shooting drills, I call it 5x5. You know, basically you have to make 5 in a row from 5 different spots. If you make 4 and you miss, you go back to 0. Well, these guys, I start at 5. Normally the best shooters can, like NBA level, can get to like 8, 9 pretty easily. But, you know, these guys were getting to 8 and 9 without even blinking. And I was just like, you got to be freaking kidding me. This is like 15 minutes the drill took. And I was like, there's no way that's ever happened to me. So I had to change a lot of stuff. So, yeah.
Are there a lot of foreign coaches there, or a lot of local Japanese coaches?
No, probably actually more local Japanese coaches. There isn't as many. Top coach in top league is Serbian. It's probably like 4 or 5, 4 in the top league and 4 or 5 in the second league. So, and there's a couple in Division 3 as well. So,
and how do you find that adjustment from the BBL? I know you said about the individual players and they're proficient and you know they get the ideology of a play and they can execute. So how do you coach that differently than you did maybe in the BBL?
Everything
like in game coaching.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, the Japanese league is unique. You know, it's a 60-game regular season. So you play every single weekend. You play Saturday and Sunday, either home or away. You sometimes play some Wednesday games. So you play Saturday, Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday. It's brutal. And two things change my whole way of coaching. First, you really cannot do as much preparation in the week because the players, Monday is a day off. Tuesday is almost a recovery day. And then so Wednesday is your like really hard day. And then Thursday and Friday, you're already tapering down because, you know, like one of my players said at the end of the season, coach, Friday should really just be shooting. He's like, shouldn't even be like anything more than shooting. And I was like, nothing more than shooting, not even like light up and down. He's like, you know, like light 3-on-2 or, you know, even a transition drills. He's like, no, you know, so that's kind of, but so you can really do a lot of different things tactically, but you just don't have enough time to prepare that. So you have to do a lot of stuff in pre-season. And it was just a lot of scouting. I could never fully get my philosophy of saying to these guys, look, I can teach you how to break someone's offense, first phase. But the second and third phase are going to be down to you, either winning the battle one-on-one or recovering as a team and covering up what had happened if we had broken down or if the offensive team had gotten an advantage. And so we'd spend so much time scouting plays, both with video and then on the court. And I kind of feel that wasn't a good balance for me. So that was a really interesting thing. And then in-game coaching, a lot of in-game coaching, a lot of ability to change players and move around and do different things.
Is it more of a man-to-man press zone? What kind of defense? A lot of teams. What's the general kind of feel of the league? Is it?
I did. A lot of teams just standard man-to-man. Couple of interesting things are that you know, with the Japanese players are in incredible shape and condition. So a lot of teams will press the point guard and the guards. But what teams will do to release the pressure is just pass it to the import four. And of course, the opposite import four, who's probably playing 37 minutes a game both days, doesn't want to go up there and press. So they just advance the ball into their offense. So it's some really interesting things, and you have to kind of think those things through as well. So
what about in Germany? Was it similar as far as pressing the BBL and zone, the same mixed defenses, or more man-to-man?
Germany, a lot of different coaches, different philosophy. Some pressing, some, you know, quarter court, half court defense.
So a mixed bag kind of thing.
Yeah, mixed bag. Yeah, exactly, mixed bag. But in Germany, the one thing was, boy, when you got the ball over the halfway line, it was super physical. Like, and everyone kind of, that was the first time that, like in the BBL, you guys know my sets and you could break them up. But actually, it's funny because you coached him. Okay, I think it was my first ever game in Germany in the league. But Chris Alexander was guarding my point guard. My point guard's coming over running, 22. And Chris Alexander's turning around like, hey, Diamond. Like, I'm like, what the hell? These guys know all of our stuff already. Yeah. So, I was like, it's definitely
well prepared.
You're really well prepared. Yeah.
Right. So one thing that we've done now that we've kind of talked about this, and like I said, we'll circle back to some other things we haven't really talked about yet. From your experience, you've had a a great career in developing talent, and you now coached in different environments, and you've seen all kind of parts of the game. What are some of your advice for a young British player looking to develop when they hit those kind of crossroads, whether a lot of players always want to run to America despite the offer? They don't care if it's Houston Baptist Church or the Baptist Church, rather than staying for a BBL club or Division I, or going to, Spain, whatever the offers may be. So what is your advice to a young guy, young player, and other parents trying to make those decisions?
I used to be a real expert in this. Like, I used to think I was the expert, of this question. Now I feel like I'm someone that's an outsider, but I think it's really a great time for a young player and for a parent of that young player, because you've got, in my view, 3 distinct options now as your young player. Let's look at them from domestic side. First, you've got a whole series of academies which never existed in the state that they did, 15 years ago. So you've got the Myerscough, the Leicester ones, just
Charnwood,
Barking Abbey, all of these, like the one in Solent. These great academies with actually really good young coaches. All, with a great philosophy. You've got people like Dougie and Curtis over at Birmingham, Mike New at Stoke. There are unique opportunities. I mean, I don't even think if you're a really good young player now, you're going to be playing in one of those situations. So your question then as a young player is, okay, what's my next route? So I think you have 3 distinct routes. If you're coming out of that academy system, you can either go to America. And I think that, again, like you said, I think it's the job of academy stroke professional coaches such as yourself to give as good advice as possible. Hey, I hear that's a really good teacher, or, this is not the program for you. You should be thinking. I try to give good advice as possible in that situation. I'll give you a couple of quick stories. It was a player that came out of Manchester. I'm not going to even name his name, but he was being recruited by, he ended up being recruited by Jim Calhoun, University of Connecticut. And I was like, listen, no offense, but you're not going to succeed in the Big East. You're 6'8", you're white, you're a decent athlete, but you're not like NBA level athlete, which is what he's recruiting. So what happens? He goes there, and give him his due, that's a great experience. But after 1 year, he has to transfer out because he knows he's not going to play. And that's happened in a lot of situations. And I think that, I don't know if you've got any better advice about how you make better decisions. It's a really, really hard one. Because those American college coaches are just coming at you. They're the best salesmen in the world. They're giving you absolutely everything, and it's a real tough one.
It's different for me. I've had to have a kind of mindset change a little bit too. Speaking on your point, I agree, but I think the culture now is guys it's so accustomed to transfer. Like when I was coming through college, it's probably right before that was like a normality where guys will go to a school and then transfer, or go to a D2 and be like, I'm just going to be here a couple of years and try to get to a D1. And that was just maybe just now starting to kick off a little bit. But nowadays, it seems like if they do 4 years, they know their 5th year, they're going to go somewhere else already. That's foregone conclusion. But so it's a little bit different, but it's always picking that first school to give you opportunity to transfer to another school after that, rather than you might spiral out and not get another good school, or you might, drop your stock if you don't do a good job. So it's a lot more confusing and tricky than some of these guys may think or realize.
So my next point to the American college situation for young people in the UK is this: if that's a borderline student athlete, i.e., if they stayed in the UK, would they go to university? Probably not. Okay, that's a classic situation. And listen, he's my guy, so I can talk about him. But Darius Defoe is the classic example. Okay, Darius Defoe would have certainly could have played low to mid major Division One college, you know, or in a great Division Two program, but you know, he wasn't academically inclined to go and study. He wanted to play basketball. So but if you've got a borderline guy, I've always said this, even if it's not a great basketball situation, you've got an opportunity of getting a 4-year degree in a country and gaining life experience and skills. And that's part of the issue, you know, part of the thing that we're trying to develop. We're trying to develop people. So I've always never tried to stop people to have that opportunity. So I think,
and again, the difference is now a lot of places here you're getting those opportunities with the Bucks competition and how that's progressed. So a lot of guys are getting education
and so my point is that the second route that I have is, you know, Europe now. You know, go to Europe. I think that's I mean, we've got great examples of Dan Clark and Joel Freeland and these type of guys that, you know, didn't go to college in America. They went straight to Europe. Carl Brand's kid, Real Madrid, all of them, you know, the whole group of players that have gone back out there and done an incredible job. So, you know, you can't say anything bad about that. That's a great opportunity. If you're a high level player, I think you have to be really a talent though to do that. So that's an option. And then the third option is, like you saying, you know, is to stay here, go through the academy process, go on to a university situation, which now you have some real opportunity. I mean, I know your, you know, club is linked in, you know, obviously Leicester is linked into Loughborough, Worcester. I just told a kid from Denmark, actually, he's actually living in Vietnam, go and enroll in at the University of Worcester to do your sports course, because you're going to have a 50-50 chance of making like the roster, or he's not going to be able to play as an import player, but he's going to be a great practice player. He plays Bucks, and that's the same as any British kid. And so I've told that to like 3 or 4 different British kids. Hey, go to Worcester, go to Loughborough, because you're going to get a great opportunity to play. And I think almost all the BBL teams are linked into that. I think Vince's University of East London, Plymouth, Bristol. So that's a great opportunity. So I think that's the 3, you know, those options now are much more clearer and defined. And I think that was the difference to when I was coaching those younger players. We were having to sell something that people didn't really understand. And we were trying to tell either a parent or parents, you know, guardians, you know, look, don't, you know, you can trust us, you know, this kid's going to somewhere foreign and stuff, you know, and he's one of the few that's doing it. Whereas now it's pretty much, you know what to expect kind of thing. So I think that's a good situation.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we're going to circle back. So it's funny because when I first got the job as a player coach in Sheffield, prepped all summer, and I had my layout. I took bits and pieces from my illustrious 4-year pro career at the time I was young, and you were the first game I had, Everton, and I was doing a 3-out 2 in motion offense to start the season, and that's when you had Andre Smith. You were a really, really, really good team, but it was the first game, so you never know where everyone lies, and you guys beat us by 18, and everyone, oh man, I took the playbook and just, that's it. It's, oh my God, I'm not going to win a game. It's horrible. It's bad idea, everything's wrong. Throw the playbook out. And it was one of the best lessons I had. And that gave me a lot of confidence, because the next time you play, I think the following weekend, you beat someone by 40 or 50 or something crazy. And everyone looked at me like, actually, that wasn't.
Yeah. You know, I didn't know that that was our first game. You know, like I said, I tried to remember some things from those from all of my years, and there was some, like I've said to you a couple of times. I only remember the losses, the really bad losses and stuff, more than I remember any wins as such. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time. I mean, you know, you came in, there was I went back and I looked at our scouting reports against you the year after, because I was interested about that second season. And boy, you know, you had like Mike Cook, you know, who's like one of the best imports. Like, I mean, he had 39 and I think 40 he had 40 something and then 39 in 2 games that we played in that season. And I was like, what the hell? And we were doing our utmost to stop him scoring. It was like our number one thing in the scout report. So yeah, it was, you had some really, really, really good teams there. Really good teams.
Yeah. It was something that, you know, that those kind of teams you put together, and you know, it was you and probably the Newcastle teams. Rob was still getting it together, and I think the club was still kind of growing, but you two were kind of like for me, the measuring sticks of if I'm doing, because it was all test and trial and error with me. I had no like back to go back and check and add. It was like, all right, I did 3 out, 2 in. I'm gonna change the 4 out, 1 in now, and that's what I changed to after that game, and I went with that. So I did, you know, I trapped in the ball screen. Now I'm gonna hedge, and so everything was just at the first game. Just made me immediately test everything I've kind of put together and get faith in it.
If you think about it, though, like in 2-8, you know, 2-9, 2-7, you know, those type of years. I mean, most teams were 3 out, 2 in. You know, a lot of sets run like that. And to be honest with you, I actually, you know, was 4 out, 1 in only because I'd spent so much time with Chris Finch on the national team. And I went to see Chris, you know, in Brie and in Mons. I was watching his practices. I mean, that was like, you know, going to GB practice was like going to like coaching clinic. Just like no word of a lie. I was every day I'd write a new drill down, you know, when you were with Chris, you know, it was just like unbelievable. So I learned so much from him. And so I started developing my own philosophy, reimagining my own philosophy based on some of the stuff that he was doing. But, you know, that's not the case. Like, you know, at that time, I mean, you watch the NBA and stuff, you know, and the spacing was nowhere near what it is now. So.
No, yeah, it's funny when you watch back and you see the stat line. The score lines is, you know, Bulls 82, Celtics whatever 67. You're like, now you see the 130, the 100. It was totally different. Everything was just the way the players played, and it's evolving sport, isn't it? It's always changing, and you got to learn to grow with it.
And that's you know, I found that this year more than anything, just especially like on ball screen defensive coverages. You know, like really, like there's so many multiple actions now. Like you know, it's ball screen and reverse, and then another ball screen. And you really gotta like this, depending on where you are on the court, depending on your philosophy and stuff. You know, you're probably going to end up with like 3 or 4 ways of defending something, you know, based in one set offense. So yeah, it's tough, and you know, it's definitely the biggest challenge at this moment.
So we've had obviously, and you've been blessed enough to kind of work with a lot of them, but BBL's produced quite a few really successful coaches that transcend the league and that had great careers outside of it. What do you think that's down to? That you know, we seem to produce these quality coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like in Chris and Nick's camp when they talk about stuff like they talk about the league. Listen, the league gets a bad rap, you know, from in the world of basketball, mainly because it's not one of the highest paying leagues, and the professionalism of certain things, both on and off the court, is not at the level, say, in Europe or obviously in the NBA and stuff. But as a league to coaching, especially with those back-to-back games like Friday, Sunday or Saturday, Sunday, different types of coaches and different types of players, I think it's, you know, like, I loved coaching in it, and you know, I think that you know, certainly, yeah, just, you know, just the ability to maybe it's more about there's a little bit less pressure to win every single game. I mean, everyone wants to win, you know, like obviously Fab was driven to win like crazy. You are driven to win like crazy. You wouldn't win trophies and have a successful program like you've had if you weren't driven. But there's just a little bit less pressure, unlike in some leagues that I've been in where, you know, if you do start losing, you could be fired, you know. So I think that gives you confidence as a coach to kind of maybe experiment or feel confident in yourself to get your message across. And I tell you, you know, I know what it's like on the other side, because like even this season, we started as a pressing, trapping type team, you know, really wearing teams down. And we took some really bad injuries at the start of the season. We took some, we went from having an incredible preseason, incredible first 2 or 3 games. And then we started a losing run of like 4 games. And I lost confidence, you know, because the president and the GM are questioning our tactics and everything. And then I brought us back and became a safe quarter-court, half-court defensive team. Now, we kind of, you know, weathered the storm, and we you know, we were successful in majority of the season. But at the same time, my players actually at the end of the season were like, why didn't we stay pressing and trapping? That was what we really thought we were good at. And so it's a really interesting question you asked. But I mean, you know, I think that overall, I think the league gives a great opportunity for coaches to develop. And there've been some great, there's been some really, really good coaches in this league.
What's some of your greatest battles in the games you kind of look back on finally? And, you know, you said you always remember the losses. What are some memories from your coaching that, you know, were prized? Those are the games that you won't never forget, special games.
Yeah, special. I mean, first win. I would say my first one was when I was at Newcastle, and I was really young there, and I took that team to the cup final, to the trophy final in the first season, and that was like, I felt that was pretty special, because that year before I got there, they were the worst team in the league. So I thought that was a real big, like, a statement. And at that time, there were like really big power teams in that league. So I was really proud of that. Then obviously when I won that first trophy with Everton, when we played Plymouth, and then you know, all of those trophies that I won at Everton, you know, I'm proud of in each different way. When you know, we made the playoff final 3 consecutive years. Obviously we lost to you in 2010, 11. What's the treble year? Yeah. So that stopped us winning the treble. Well, we didn't have a chance of winning the treble after we lost that game. And, you know, it was a crushing kind of, like, really, that was like a gut check moment, because guys were incredible that day. I said to you just off air that, you know, I looked at the scouting notes and like the review of the game and stuff. And, you know, like, obviously D'Agostino played great. You coached great, you know, just gave it to us. And I remember just being shell-shocked in the locker room after the game, sitting there just like, you know, what the hell's just happened here? And, you know, we actually lost to Chester the week after, I think. And then, you know, I had to call a team meeting, and I was like, look, you know, there's some problems off the floor, but we also as a team pretty close. And I said, look, you know, we gotta come together. So we did a great job of like finishing up that season with the 3 trophies and stuff.
It's funny because that game, just real quick, that we didn't tell you this. We were having a bit of trouble within our team in a turmoil a little bit, because we had a lot of scorers that year. Marcus Stout, D'Agostino, Patton. Then we had Paul Williams, and he wasn't getting his touches. Right. And I was trying to, and we had Olu as well on the team. So we had quite a bit of depth in scoring. So I actually went back to a 3-out-2 in that game, which we had never done. And I just put it in for that game and did a 3-out-2 win with a lot of cross screens, down screens for Paul to get the ball in the post, to D'Agostino get that 3 top of the key, and it just happened to work out. So just lucky, really. But it was only because I only changed it because I need to get the ball to more different people because it wasn't moving enough. It was starting to stick.
No, it was no luck. I mean, you know, like I said, you guys were tremendous, and you know, it was we've had some great battles. I do know for sure. I was actually thinking, you know, when I told you about the year before, which would have been 9-10. We had those 2 overtime games at EIS, and it's definitely one of them I got thrown out in. There's no question I got thrown out in one. I can't remember what it was, but I do remember.
It was always good to have in the sideline to take the pressure off of me from getting all the technicals.
Yeah. But here's the funny part of the story is that this season I didn't get one technical. And I didn't even get close to getting to one technical because this league was really weird in that, you know, they really frown on that type of coaching, and it was killing me, you know. I'm just not like that, you know. But
did they have to tell you that when you got there, or did you have to figure it out on your own?
No, they told me that, and but I feel that it kind of took away from some of my emotion on the sidelines, but they're just, you know, you really, like I've seen some of the domestic coaches basically sit there, you know, sit on the bench, you know, and let the players play, and not really do anything other than stand up off of timeouts and stuff. It was tough. It was really, really tough. But yeah,
what about practice? Were you demonstrative and you get loud, or were you reserved?
Couple of practices, but on the whole,
how'd they respond to it?
They were surprised. Like my GM was surprised at the end of the season. He expected me to be more like a little bit more volatile and stuff, but I kind of went there with that kind of mindset and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I miss those days in the BBL. You know, like our battles there. And yeah, it was, you know, there were some great games. And then even when I was at Glasgow, you know, you beat us on that opening night in the arena and stuff. So, you know, actually I do have, I have like a memorable moment, like one of my most memorable moments. I do have the video clip as well. Is not when you were there. It's actually when Chris was there. I was coaching Newcastle. It was my second season, and we went to overtime. This was the team I had, like Fab, Malcolm Leake, Sean Myers, and we went to overtime, and there was like 10, 14 seconds to go. This was played at Sheffield Arena, so this is a big crowd. It's a Sky Sports game, and you know, Malcolm dribbled, penetrated, and kicked it to one of our local young shooters, and he hit the free. I always like that one because I know that I beat Chris on that day as well. So that was whenever you could think that you could beat Chris Finch or Nick Nurse, that was always a good thing. So
I haven't had that pleasure, I guess. So
yeah,
one day.
No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. But you must be close to Chris's like trophy record. Like or have you overtaken him?
No, I don't know. I don't really know. I think he's still got it. I've been kind of dry the last couple of years, so he's safe. He's been safe the last couple of seasons, unfortunately. But I got some time. I'm not going anywhere, so I'll try to catch him soon.
Good. That's awesome. I mean, like I said, the club's got a lot of history, and I hope that you get the facility and stuff built, which is really important. I think it's such an important part of the growth of the game. You know, obviously you see Leicester and Newcastle, what they've done, and obviously Bristol have got plans. So I mean, the game is moving in the right direction. Just gotta. I mean, as with everything, it's media or it's TV, and it's getting fans back watching. You know, we just don't seem to. I mean, probably with the exception of Newcastle, no one seems to be able to really solve the fans, like on a consistent basis. That's this. I mean, I was kind of shocked that Leicester, they'd won they'd won the championship and they had like 500 to a midweek game. And I understand it's midweek, but, you know, it's just kind of like, yeah, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, terrestrial solves some of those issues where you just have more exposure and you kind of get maybe more casual fans, more people buy into the season. But I think it's kind of hard. You go to places like Worcester and they're always sold. Even in Manchester.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, they even though I've spoken to Danny and some games like we lose, but they just they got great fans that show up, and you know we have a little bit of issue sometimes because we play a few home games in a row. Sometimes it thins out a bit, but when we have a good break and we play home and a couple that we have good crowd support. But I agree. You know, we want to get more. We want to keep it, you know, to capacity and busting through the seams. But it won't happen without everything coming together with terrestrial channel and development of the game and all that stuff has to just keep growing.
Yeah, I mean, the TV is the key to the deal. You know, it's like getting that great TV coverage and then getting more media is so important, so important. I think that, you know, leagues made real strides in how it's promoted the games and stuff. It just, we still seem to be kind of like stuck at one level. And I think this league can go much, much, much higher. So, and that takes more commercial, you know, takes like, you know, real commitment from the commercial side.
What I will say, that one thing that, you know, that goes under not noticed as much is that we have a lot more access to watch our games now than probably in the past with YouTube. Viewership, live, perform, and those different platforms we had the previous league, I can't remember right now. So there are people watching and tuning in that don't necessarily get to the seat, but they're still supporting. So I think there's growth in that as well.
Yeah, that's funny about that as well. You're just saying that because when I went back to look at those few clips, I remembered, you know, of course, back then there was no access to Synergy as coaches. You know, so we actually used to have a young kid just carry the video camera around and film those games, and we had an advantage over that. I know Rob did it, I did it. I'm not sure if you did it.
We had Philip Brown for us.
Yeah, Philip Brown. Okay, yeah. So I mean, we did some tape exchanges and stuff, and those. I mean, some of these young coaches, they have no clue, you know, like even their academy games are like online now, you know, it's like they're uploaded within like a couple of hours and they're breaking tape and stuff. Like they had no
every
clue.
Ball screen going to the right with the left hand, like they can click a button and get all those.
They can click a button, exactly.
It's incredible, really.
And that's one thing that I'll say from just, you know, from a kind of coaching standpoint. I don't think these younger coaches really you know, realize how lucky they are, because there's a lot of stuff that we did as young coaches that you know, they don't have to do now. There's a lot of this stuff is there, and geez, you know, even though we're in lockdown type situation, you've got all this time in the world. I don't even think you've got enough time to watch the amount of stuff that coaches are putting online, you know, webinars, clinics, you know, all of the world basketball coaches stuff, so much information. You can build your whole philosophy just watching these guys. So it's crazy.
What's your views on analytics? I don't know if you saw the Chris Finch when I talked to him, and he was
really good question. I watched every single minute of the Chris thing and the Chris show, and Rob as well, Vince. You know, I really enjoyed what you've been doing. So the analytics is really interesting. I mean, how far can like our level of basketball, you know, how much can you actually gain from it? Of course, you can look at, you know, some of the statistics from a pure basketball standpoint, or you're looking at it from an individual standpoint. It's a tough one because I have to believe that I'm more old school. There's some eye test stuff there for me. There's feel. There's, you know, like some of the analytic stuff doesn't show like a real competitor and drive of a person. Sometimes they don't show the pure value. And Chris's situation is so much more different because they're at the total nth degree, and their players, they're trying to get the smallest gain Whereas our players may not, even possess the real skill to be able to make, like if I've got, I had 4/5 players that could have and should have all shot over 40% from the 3-point line this year. Actually, only 3 of them did. So 3 out of 5. So my question is more, is it mental or is it physical? Was it the actual technique of the shot? Was it physical preparation, i.e. were they in good shape, or their setup, their footwork? Or was it, in the mind, for sure, for some of them it is. And again,
or the flip that is, were they shooting them in the right spot? If you look at the analytics of, they shoot 40% from the right side and 32% from the left side.
You know what? I never, and that's a great coaching point you made. If you got the ability to have that, and I had 2 young assistants who one was incredible with video, the other was a very analytical mind, and actually I never really made us break that down to that degree. So I need to work harder in that area myself.
I'm the same, yeah. I'm saying.
I mean, definitely I need to think that one through a little bit more. And there's definitely, here in Japan, the way those games are played, there's definitely some key areas that you can say, right, if we get this right, through analytics, we can really improve in these areas. That same for recovery. I'm thinking now, that's such a huge area. How do you get the athlete to recover quicker and faster? All the compression stuff, or all of the stuff that you can do now. What's the protocol that you're going to use with your athletes? And that's where we were at, because we have like a discipline procedure there, and those are things that I don't miss from the BBL. Like we're getting on the bus and getting off the bus, because it was completely different. Our situation was, there's never a game. It doesn't matter if we're only an hour away by bus. We have to go the night before a game to the hotel, and we stay the night before, and we do shoot around, then we do the game in the afternoon, then we recover, then we go back the next day and we do exactly the same. So it's those are the type of things that were completely different. So
I didn't really ask this, but I just want to touch on it because I feel like it's important that just to ask a question in this time is, you're in Japan, and what's it like now for you in this time with the quarantine and all this stuff? Are you finding it difficult? Are you able to, quality of life all right? Are you staying safe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably, people in Japan really have very little idea. It's a very insular country anyway, and quite rightly so. They're a world-class country. They have, everything is super high level in everything they do. But they did declare a national emergency, declaration of emergency about 4 or 5 weeks ago, which they just stopped about 10 days ago. But my area, the Ibakari region, we were under these emergency restrictions for like 2 weeks, and I barely noticed anything different in my life.
Right.
We're able to go anywhere we want. We're able to drive wherever we want. We're in the supermarket with standing next to 2 people. I'm going to my coffee shop, and the woman is giving me the change and touching my hand. There's no concept. And why is there no concept? Because listen, I'm not getting into the politics and stuff, but UK is my own country, but there are 600, and I think now is 660 deaths in a 4-month period. Basically a 4-month period, because Japan was one of the first countries outside of China to get positive tests and to have deaths, if you remember. And to only have 670 deaths, or whatever the exact number is, in that time when the UK is still, 300 a day, 400 a day, and nearly 40,000 people died. I mean, I'm embarrassed, to be honest with you. So me, myself, I'm extremely lucky. I'm just more concerned for yourself and your family and everyone else that's in the UK, because it's not what you've just been through is a real tough thing, real tough.
And then the last thing I have to kind of bring up and talk about is just you're writing your book. What's the storybook ending you got for your career? What does it look like? What is it? Tell me.
You know, I kind of, you know, like the only thing I want to say on this is that when I first came in, I took the Newcastle job. So I went to Iceland and I took the Newcastle job. I was ridiculously young, you know, as a young coach. And then when I came back to Everton, I was still, everyone called me a young coach. Now, everyone calls me the oldest coach. It's like me, Paul James, you know, like the oldest coaches. And I said this to Paul about a month ago, 2 or 3 months ago. It's like, what the hell? Where did this happen? You know, what is going on? You know, so I don't feel like I'm anywhere near at the end. I really would like to be, you know, really more successful out here. And I definitely want to come back and coach in the UK. There's no doubt about that. My heart and my soul is in the country. So I definitely would love to do that. And I'd love to do what, you know, yourself and Rob and Fab have done with, you know, having like an extended program, you know, and that's something that I've not been able to do. I was doing it in Everton and I was really in Mersey. I was did 4 years there. And had good success, and that's what I really wanted to continue and do it. Yeah. So, you know, there's a lot to be said for that stability and that ability to year on year, you know, kind of get better or change something or revise or completely revamp the team. So at the moment, kind of like just trying to get a degree of success and also stability. But yeah, I hope that I'm going to have the opportunity to coach for a number of more years.
Well, I'm sure you will.
What about yourself?
I mentioned for 20-year-old.
How many more trophies for you in Sheffield? Lots more.
Yeah, I mean, I have no plans of stopping. No really desires to leave. I love the club. I love Sheffield. I think the reasons we haven't won, we know why. So it's okay that, you know, we know how to overcome that. And sometimes it's just the part that people don't want to hear is the business side of things. You know, it's not always roses. So, but we've been competitive and we've made finals recently, 2018. So it's about getting that right, getting the arena, getting everything financially so the business is strong, so then we can try to win as much as we can.
I will say I do miss those opportunities of winning those 2 cup trophies, you know, the cup and the trophy, you know, because like some years it's like 3 or 4 games to the final. And you only have to just look this year. I mean, basically discount Newcastle. There were 3 teams that have really, I think that's their first time, or no, Worcester won before, but Worcester, Bristol, and then, you know, Solent. I mean, who was ever going to believe that was going to happen? So, I mean, there's some great opportunities, and that's why every fan base and every team should feel really good about being in the BBL, because you can, you know, those things can happen. I mean, look at Matt. Matt did an incredible job. You know, that team was so bad for that season before, and then he comes in and is able to win a trophy straight away. So, no, it's good stuff. Really good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate it, man. You better go get some sleep. The sun must be up by now.
It actually is, because here it rises at 4:30 in the morning. So it's an early stuff. But listen, it's been great.
Pleasure.
I hope I said this to a few people, but I actually want Mark Woods to do this, but whether Mark would ever get around to doing this, some sort of round table with like the BBL coaches or a few BBL coaches, and I'd love to come in and because you can see that stuff when they do that in America, like then they maybe talk a little trash against each other, or they remember something and stuff. So yeah, I'm really appreciate it, and to all of the Facebook listeners and Sheffield Sharks fans and stuff, please stay safe and have good health, and hopefully at some stage in the future we can be back facing each other on the sidelines again.
Absolutely. You take care, man. It's a pleasure, and great talking to you.
Okay, take care.